Tonight, it is my incredible honor to introduce you all to Dr. Nicole Schultz. And Nicole received her bachelor's degree in biochemistry from Southern Methodist University, after which she began her research career studying human movement and energy expenditure at the Locomotor Performance Laboratory in Dallas, Texas. With a deep understanding of exercise metabolism, Nicole moved to Boston to pursue nutrition education. She completed her MPH with a focus in health communication and PhD in biochemical and molecular nutrition with exercise physiology emphasis at Tufts University. Her primary research explored the impact of diet, physical activity, and stress on cardiometabolic health outcomes, primarily in underserved communities and school districts. Alongside her academic career, Nicole remained involved in the fitness community, coaching clients and serving as a VP of training for a fast-growing boxing fitness startup in Boston. Currently, she's an adjunct professor at George Washington University and serves as the wellness advisor for Schultz Financial, translating nutrition and exercise science to enhance the well-being of clients. Given her personal experience as a triathlete and a boxer, both of which require a strategic approach to fuel for performance, she's excited to discuss how underfueling impacts performance and how we can prevent it. So tonight, we are incredibly lucky to hear Nicole's personal story of underfueling and how she learned to combat that, in addition to learning these wonderful science-backed tips on how to nourish our bodies properly for our athletics and exercise. So now I would like to welcome Nicole on to the class to teach you all about this wonderful topic. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, Kaylee. Thank you so much. Thanks for that wonderful introduction, and thank you, InsideTracker, for having me tonight. I'm so excited to be speaking with all of you about underfueling and properly fueling for athletic endeavors, whether it's exercising or a specific sport. This is relevant for everybody, so it's very important, and I'm excited to be here. So first, as Kaylee said, I'll start off by sharing my personal story, and then we'll dive right into the presentation. I, growing up, was both a dancer and a martial artist. I did kickboxing as well as dancing in high school. I had to choose one. There's only so much time in a day. So I chose dance, and I went off to college. My first year of college, I decided, I'm just going to see what this college thing is all about. I'm not going to do any, sports or anything that requires a lot of commitment and dedication. I'm just going to have some fun and focus on my studies. But of course, right away, I missed kind of that, team sport and, working towards something with a group of people, like-minded people. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to try out for the dance team. And that was that. So of course, I successfully gained the freshman 15, had a little too much fun my first year. And so that summer, going into my second year, I decided I needed to lose some weight. So I just went crazy, started working out a lot, and I did not properly fuel that training. So I went on to lose, the freshman 15 and a little more, but I did experience, some underfueling symptoms, which we'll talk about later. And that was about, 3 years in college, really focusing on, maintaining a certain body image for that sport. And it wasn't until after college where, dance was over. Again, I just wasn't the one to go to the gym just to work out. I needed to be part of something, a group, or train for something. So I joined a triathlon club. And for any endurance athletes in the audience, you know how important fuel is for any endurance sport. And so I really started to learn through this personal experience in triathlon, kind of the requirements I needed both to fuel leading up to training periods into race days, as well as fueling during races, and then making sure that I was refueling and recovering for my next training period. So that's my personal story. And from that, we'll go ahead and transition right into the presentation. Just to give you a quick overview of what we'll be discussing today. First, I'll lay the groundwork broadly in terms of how the food we eat and how that is used to fuel performance, maybe kind of a review for a lot of you. Then we'll discuss signs and long-term risks of underfueling. And then lastly, we'll review factors that contribute to underfueling, and then strategies to prevent underfueling and estimating your daily needs. So first, on the next slide, I'll go ahead, like I said, and lay the groundwork. broad strokes, how the food we eat is used to fuel our performance. So the nutrients that we eat are broken down into two main categories, macro and micro. Now, there are many micronutrients. These are your vitamins and your minerals. And while they are implicated in energy pathways in our bodies, the nutrients that we really need on a larger scale or a more macro scale are macronutrients. So as you see here, there are three macronutrients: carbohydrate, fat, and protein. And when we eat these nutrients, whatever we need at that time, when the body's at rest, and what I mean by rest is, we wake up in the morning, we walk around, we get dressed, we brush our teeth, right? All of that requires energy. Our heart is pumping, that requires energy, right? So all of that is used by the fuel we eat. Anything that's not needed, so that we eat that's in excess of our needs, is stored in different tissues. And then during exercise, our body calls on those stores to fuel your movement. So on the next slide, you'll see a great image of this. You see that really out of the three macronutrients, the two primary fuel sources for exercise are fat and carbohydrate. So you can see fat is in yellow and carbohydrate is in green. And if this is a little bit small for you, that's okay. All that you need to know is that you have fat and carbohydrate at the top. Protein is in purple. You see that does not contribute very much to fueling your exercise. When you think of protein, we think more of muscle repair, protein synthesis, more that refueling side of things. And you can see these two macronutrients go through a lot of different metabolic processes, all at the end to ultimately generate ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. So that's what you see at the very bottom, that small yellow burst, that's your energy. So some examples of this: your heart, as I mentioned earlier, your diaphragm, those are muscles that allow you to pump blood and circulate nutrients to your working muscles. You can also think about a bicep curl, right? So your biceps muscles, they need to contract in order to move that weight through the curl and then to resist the weight on the way down. As you're doing that, your muscles are contracting, and that's utilizing ATP. So in other words, without ATP, which is derived from your carbohydrate and fat sources, our muscles couldn't do the work that we demand on them for exercise. So now that you've made that connection between the food we eat and the energy that we generate from that food to fuel movement, we'll shift into signs and long-term risks of underfueling. So many of you, I'm sure, have heard the term of hitting the wall. That's kind of a term used in the endurance world. Typically during longer bouts of exercise, this is when an athlete feels kind of sudden fatigue, maybe their legs feel heavy, they feel a loss of energy. This is because the glycogen stores are depleted in their liver and in their muscles. And the glycogen stores is, as I said earlier, anything that you consume that's not used right away is stored in your muscle and your liver. So the storage form of your carbohydrates is glycogen. In addition to hitting the wall, other signs of underfueling include decreased performance. You may experience decreased muscle strength, decreased coordination, and maybe even difficulty concentrating. More long-term risks of underfueling include decreased response to training and poor recovery. Your athlete or you may experience increased irritability, increased risk of injury, maybe chronic illness, increased emotional stress. Of course, inadequate intake of nutrients over a long period of time can lead to some deficiencies and then associated ailments, muscle loss, low bone mineral density, which again, over time can contribute to stress fractures and irreversible osteoporosis. In women, we see menstrual cycle loss. And then lastly, which I'll talk about on the next slide, is REDS, or relative energy deficiency in sport. So just really important not to overlook the effects of underfueling, because they really can have serious health implications. So on the next slide, you'll see the definition of relative energy deficiency in sport. The International Olympic Committee defines this as impaired physiological functioning caused by relative energy deficiency, includes but is not limited to impairments of metabolic rate, menstrual function, bone health, immunity, protein synthesis, and cardiovascular health. So just wanted to highlight this and highlight its importance. So In other words, really by underfueling, you have low energy availability, and therefore your body doesn't have the sufficient energy to perform its daily required physiological function. And also important to note, this just doesn't happen in elite athletes. So this has been observed in those who are just recreationally active, as well as observed in males. We don't know as much about the consequences in males, but we have seen it in males as well. And one analogy that I've heard that I really like, and I'll give credit to last week's speaker, Ali Gallup. We were discussing this, and she shared this analogy with me that she uses with her athletes, and I loved it. So I'll go ahead and share it with you. If you think of energy availability as the dietary calories left over to cover your training needs after your basic physiological needs have been accounted for. So as I mentioned earlier, your heart pumping, right? It's not something we consciously do, but that requires energy, along with a lot of other metabolic processes in our bodies just to keep us alive and well. So for instance, let's say your daily needs, cost about $1,800, right? We're gonna think about it as a currency, $1,800. And then your exercise is another $600, right? For a total of $2,400 for your daily need. Now, if you only deposit $1,500 into your bank account, but then you want to withdraw $2,400, you have a problem, right? So now you're in a deficit. And then if you think about this over time, this deficit worsens day after day as you continue to deposit less than you want to withdraw. So I thought that was kind of a nice analogy, a little more basic in terms of understanding the consequences of long-term underfueling. But as a science nerd, the next slide is really one of my favorites. So thank you, Ali, for that analogy. I'll go ahead and orient you to this graph before I dive into what it's demonstrating. So on the left-hand side, or the vertical axis or the y-axis, you have muscle glycogen. So again, that's that stored form of energy in your muscles that you use during exercise. On the x-axis is time in hours. And you can see either in the red, those are 3 training bouts every 24 hours, also depicted by little green bars at the very bottom of that x-axis. So lastly, the blue and the red lines both indicate 2 different types of diets. So the blue line is a high carbohydrate diet. You'll see in the legend, it says CHO, that means carbohydrate. So the blue line is a high carbohydrate diet, and the red line is a low carbohydrate diet. So you see at the very beginning, or at hour 0, this is the first training bout, these 2 individuals are starting with similar muscle glycogen stores. You see they go through their training bout, they use up some of that muscle glycogen, and then over the next 24-hour period during their refueling period, the blue line consumes a high carbohydrate diet, and the red line consumes a low carbohydrate diet. Now, if you look at hour 24, or that second training bout, and you look at their muscle glycogen stores, at the start of their training, you see the person who refueled with adequate carbohydrate now has replenished their stores. So they're starting from a place where they have more energy to fuel that next training bout compared to the other person. And then similarly, if you look at day 3, again, this person has replenished the blue line, they've replenished their energy stores, and the red line is starting with even a lower store of glycogen. So you can imagine the impact this is going to have on their performance. The person with the blue line is going to have a much better performance output than the person in the red line after a few days. You can see this compounds day over day. There is some research, demonstrating that you can strategically start training your body to be more fat efficient, and so you wait to tap into those glycogen stores because you can use stored fat as energy, and so this is called glycogen sparing. So if you look up glycogen sparing, you'll see a lot of research on this, but that takes very strategic training for more advanced and endurance athletes. So I'll leave you with this image. I think it's fascinating, and if you want to come back to it and make it bigger in the recording, you can. One more thing I want to mention before moving on to the next slide is rest days. And rest days, nutrition is just as important on your rest day as it is on a training day. So rest days shouldn't be days of restriction just because you're not training. They should be days when you're providing your body with the appropriate fuel to recover and replenish those energy stores for more training to come. So given this importance of preventing underfueling, I just want to talk briefly about factors that contribute to underfueling, and then we'll get into the more exciting stuff, the strategies to prevent it. So on the next slide, we'll go, oh, just kidding, question. I forgot. So let's go ahead and go into a question, make sure y'all are still awake. So you just completed a tough workout and know you should refuel. I'm curious what the best time frame is in which to do so. So we'll let the answers roll in, and we will go ahead and get to that, the answers of that question a little bit later in the presentation. So go ahead and submit your guesses, or you probably know this if you've been active in refueling. So next I want to get into factors that contribute to underfueling. I just think it's important to be aware of these. You know, I like to put them into two categories: unintentional and intentional. So unintentional factors that contribute to underfueling may be really not a sense of what hunger feels like in your body. Maybe you recently changed your training program, but you didn't increase your caloric intake accordingly. Also, you just may be really busy. You skip meals, you skip snacks because you're busy, or maybe you're stressed, or you're anxious. So those are unintentional factors that contribute to underfueling. Factors may also be intentional. So maybe you're purposefully dieting for weight loss, or making a weight for sport such as boxing. Oftentimes boxers have to, make a certain weight in order to even compete. So they've been training for so long, and then they severely restrict calories in order to meet that weight. Other intentional factors include restrictive eating or disordered eating practices, and also potentially avoiding food groups. So with that, we'll shift into strategies to prevent underfueling. There's a variety of ways you can prevent underfueling. The simplest, yet you could argue the least precise, is to just follow a few simple tips and to listen to your body. So tip number one, before exercise. So on the next slide, you'll see we recommend typically no less than about 2 hours before exercise, consume about 200 to 500 calories. Now, if you're going to engage in higher intensity exercise like running, then you may want to aim for more easily digestible foods. What I mean by that is limit fat. Fat is a little bit slower to digest and absorb. Limit fiber, and limit protein. If you're going out for an endurance ride, maybe something that's a little longer, a little bit less intense, you may actually tolerate fat, fiber, and protein well. So this is kind of a trial and error. Some of us have more sensitive tummies than others. So you just want to kind of test what works for you, but aim for that 200 to 500 calories. Examples I like to give, although there's plenty of examples, are toast, a little bit of peanut butter, again, if tolerated, maybe a bagel with a little bit of cream cheese. Now, you may be wondering, if you are getting up and working out first thing in the morning, is it okay to exercise fasted? Should I try something? If you can tolerate it, then try to have a little something before you go out for your workout. Here, maybe, carbohydrate gels, or chews, or maybe even fluids like a sports drink may be tolerated better if you are just getting up and you have 20 minutes before you go out and you work out. So on the next slide, during exercise, if you're exercising for more than an hour, or again, like I said, maybe you woke up and you went right out for your exercise, you didn't have the time to eat enough calories before your training session, you may want to consider eating during your workout. So here you want to aim for, again, easily digestible snacks. When and how much you have does depend on the intensity and the duration of your workout, and then also what you can tolerate. So a general rule of thumb is about 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour, which is the equivalent of about 120 to 240 calories of carbohydrate. Here, again, as examples, energy gels work well. Bananas also work well. Both of those examples have about 25 grams of carbohydrate. Other easy options, fruit snacks, gummy bears, a sports drink, maybe you break off the half of a Cliff Bar, crackers. I personally loved slicing up a date, putting a little almond butter in the middle and folding it back up and carrying those in a little Ziploc bag. Again, your body may not tolerate the, you got fat and protein in your almond butter, but those were my personal favorite. And just remember, you don't have to eat it all at once. So you can kind of, nibble on it throughout your exercise bout, and just avoid the mindset of, saving all your calories to have a huge brunch, as delicious as that is. The next slide, after exercise. So I see a lot of your answers have come in within an hour, right after, 30 minutes after, and within 30 minutes. Those are all correct. You want to refuel as soon as possible. So we say definitely within 2 hours, but really in the first 30 to 60 minutes are best. And studies have demonstrated that within those first 30 to 60 minutes, if you do get adequate refueling, that you actually enhance the glycogen replenishment. So recovery snack, what does it look like? We say a ratio 4-to-1, 3-to-1 carbohydrate to protein. Another way you can think about it, aim for about 15 to 25 grams of protein and about 45 to 100 grams of carbohydrate. Again, this is going to be dependent on the intensity and duration of your workout. And a good rule of thumb is about 1 gram of carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight. So take your body weight in pounds, divide it by 2.2. That'll be your body weight in kilograms. And then you want about 1 gram of carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight. So examples, yogurt and granola, maybe a smoothie. Maybe you want to throw in some extra nut butter into that smoothie to get a little additional protein and calories. And turkey sandwich is always a good one too. So on the next slide, remember, you want to consume high quality meals throughout the day. So recovery just doesn't stop right after your first post-exercise snack. It's really important to eat high quality throughout the day. So a mix of carbohydrate, fat, and protein, and you'll continue to replenish your glycogen stores for that next training bout. Again, back to the diagram that I showed earlier, right? You replenish through the next 24 hours, always refueling. All right. It's also important to note before we get into this question that you may not always be hungry right after you work out. So I know I said, follow these tips and listen to your body, but after you work out, that may not be a time you can listen to your body. Exercise does have an effect on our hunger hormone. It sometimes suppresses it, and you may not feel as hungry after exercise as we think we should based on what we need to refuel. So with this, maybe aim for your refueling nutrients in liquid form. Again, as I mentioned, a smoothie, a sports drink. Again, you want to try to find a protein source if you do go for that sports drink. And as nutritionists, we're always recommending high fiber foods because, they have so many health benefits. But if you're an active and healthy individual, don't be afraid of low fiber foods in this situation. The fiber kind of fills us up quickly, and it may fill you up before you've, had enough calories to refuel your exercise bout. So lower fiber foods are okay in this situation. Maybe you aim for white or multigrain toast, which is not typically whole wheat. And ripe banana may do, again, 100% juice may do. So, again, play around with what works for you. And again, you don't have to eat it all at once. You can kind of snack throughout that post-exercise window if it's tough for you to get all of your refuel calories at once. Question, true or false? If you are going to engage in high intensity exercise, you want to fuel beforehand with easily digestible foods. So I'll let your answers trickle in and see how many of you were paying attention. Lastly, on the next slide, if you want to be a little more precise about your food intake, you can always work with a dietitian. Look for a sports dietitian. They may have a little bit of extra training in food as it relates specifically to exercise and sport. They can help you estimate, how much additional energy you're expending when you exercise. And then they can actually also help you plan your meals to ensure that you are consuming enough food to fuel your activity. And this is really important if you are trying to lose weight as well, because restricting calories too much and then ramping up your exercise for weight loss, it may actually end up hurting you, slowing down your weight loss. So it's really important to kind of find that sweet spot, between caloric restriction and adequate fueling. And then lastly, but definitely not least, you can always monitor your biomarkers to help provide you with an objective measure to prevent underfueling. So there are some biomarkers that we can keep an eye on. Cortisol sometimes is elevated if we're not eating enough. You may start to see signs of iron deficiency. Some early studies have been shown that testosterone levels are impacted by underfueling. And then DHEAS, which is a precursor to some hormones, that may also be altered. So don't hesitate to reach out to InsideTracker, and you can help take a peek. They can help you take a peek at your biomarkers and see if there are any signs of underfueling there. So with that, I see a lot of answers to that last question, true, and true 2 hours before. So yes. Thank you for listening, and I'll go ahead and hand it over to Kaylee, and we'll answer some questions.
We can learn so much. I feel like I would like to emphasize the point for those of you who feel the need to work with a dietitian. It is very, very helpful, and you can learn so much. And for those of you who do test with InsideTracker, we offer complimentary sessions with our registered dietitians as well, so that you can review your results, which is really impactful because you can see all the results in your dashboard, which is incredible, but to also hear some things that our dietitians notice or dietitians like Nicole notice is really powerful. And sometimes you could miss something that is reflecting underfueling or high inflammation after, overtraining and things like that. So underfueling and overtraining, I think, tend to go hand in hand. So we got some questions for you, Nicole, to answer. So this is kind of the opposite, but how do you know if you're overfueling, or are there any signs of overfueling, or is that some people have a fear that they might overfuel?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, again, I'll go back to that dietitian suggestion in terms of kind of estimating your daily caloric needs and helping kind of plan your meals out. Again, going back to your hunger cues, when are you feeling full? Go back to last week's mindfulness, mindful eating and intuitive eating. But again, like I said, with exercise, you may actually not be hungry when you need to eat. So, I'll always go back to working with a dietitian, having them help you. They know the best, kind of calculations to do to help estimate. And that'll just give you a ballpark. And then again, you can kind of play with it from there. And I think just kind of over time, being aware of those signs and symptoms of underfueling are important. And if you are, hitting your goals, getting stronger, feeling energetic, not fatiguing, I think, you kind of find that sweet spot. If you're overfueling, you may feel a little heavy or lethargic, or, there may be some of those other signs where you just don't feel like you're on your A game. But yes, chat with the dietitian, get that ballpark. And then again, they're only estimations. So you kind of find that sweet spot until you feel like you're performing at your highest level.
Awesome. Yeah, I think, and also as people go from underfueling to overfueling, your body's going to try to go find homeostasis. So you might feel lethargic right along the way, but it's just the process of getting used to eating enough fuel for the workouts that you're doing. So
absolutely.
But I love the tip that you shared earlier about you don't have to eat it all really fast or in one go. You can kind of eat slowly over time. I think that's really helpful for people that might feel overwhelmed by the volume or the caloric density, and it doesn't have to be meals that are such huge volume if their stomach can't handle it. So
yeah, absolutely.
So we got a question live that says, if I'm underfueling, will it show in my biomarkers? Always wondered this. You did answer this a little bit, but do you want to just tell them which biomarkers again they can look for?
Sure, absolutely. So the answer is yes. And some of the biomarkers that we look at are cortisol. So you may see an increased level of cortisol as one of your indications of underfueling. You may show signs of iron deficiency. So InsideTracker will look at your iron panel. Testosterone also has been shown to be impacted by underfueling. The research is still, not as well established in terms of the consequences in women. but in males, we have seen altered levels of testosterone. And then something called DHEAS, which I will not say it because it's very long. The acronym is 5 letters, but that is a precursor to some hormones, and you will see altered levels of that as well. So again, InsideTracker has an awesome panel, a platform where you can kind of see all these levels, and it explains everything really well. So you can definitely track some biomarkers and see the impact.
Absolutely. Awesome. That's super helpful. A lot of people are wondering that. So we have another question live that says, I'm a dedicated cyclist. I always have fresh fruit in the car right after I finish a long ride. It sustains me until I can refuel. Is this good or bad?
Great. So it works. It definitely works. What I would say is throw in a bag of almonds with it. Your fruit is primarily carbohydrate. And so we always like to add a little bit of protein right after you work out, because that does help with protein synthesis and repairing the muscles that you may have broken down during your training period. So handful of nuts. I love the little peanut butter packs that you can get at the grocery store. So you can, if you're driving back home, you can squeeze those, and those are easy to eat on the go. String cheese is also great. I love string cheese with an apple. So again, that adds a little bit of protein to that post-workout snack. But if you forget it and you just have fresh fruit, hey, it's better than nothing, that's for sure.
Absolutely. That's great. Those are good little tips. And I also love dates stuffed with almond butter. Like, that's such a good snack. And if you freeze them too, then they're a little less messy for people to take on the go. But don't eat them frozen, because then you will hurt your teeth.
That's a great tip, actually. A little cinnamon on there too. But
yeah, cinnamon. Oh my God. So there's one more question we have. So do you recommend using an app like Cronometer to track nutrition and exercise while you're getting used to fueling enough?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I love Cronometer. It's one of my favorite tools to use in terms of kind of all the apps out there to track. Yes, I would recommend it if you want to get, if you want to kind of just learn. I think it's really helpful to start and kind of just get your bearings before you can eyeball different things. Don't drive yourself crazy, but definitely a great way to learn. Always be mindful that any software like that does use an estimation equation. So, if you really do want an accurate measurement of what your body's expending and then what you are expending during a workout, the direct measure of that is very complicated, typically done in a lab, where you're, measuring your expired air, your nose is plugged, and then you do a bunch of different analyses on that expired air just to understand what your body's using. So that's a very long-winded way of saying that just, they're great estimates, right? They're great estimates. Maybe off by 100 calories, maybe off by 200 calories, right? So, so again, just keep that in mind, but those tools are great. And Cronometer, in my opinion, is one of the best.
I'm so glad to know how to pronounce it now. I was always saying Cronometer, and that is embarrassing.
You may be right. You may be right. That's just how I've been pronouncing it.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's a wonderful tool, and it's also free for those of you who've never used it, which is great. And so there is one more question that just came in live, so I do like to honor those. And I know you touched on this, but for people just tuning in, it's helpful. So for marathon runners, what's the best way to stay fueled throughout the race? Fat, carbs? Sorry if you already answered this.
No, that's great. That's great. I'll kind of go back to saying, whatever you can tolerate, really, but carbohydrates typically is what you want to focus on. You'll see a lot of times bananas, being handed out for those really long races. That's always a good one. They do get smashed if you're like keeping them in your race shorts. Yeah, the carbohydrate, the energy gels, there's chews. Like I said, fruit snacks, gummy bears, but you do want to focus on those easily digestible carbohydrates in order to continue to fuel your exercise. But again, like we were saying, dates with almond butter. If you can tolerate the almond butter and it doesn't upset your stomach, then that also works as well.
Yeah, and then also, like, if you can't tolerate the almond butter, you could always just do like dates that rolled in. Well, of course, it's got a little fat, but shredded coconut and make date balls. It's really fun as well. So those could be a good one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then also during marathon, and again, you want to speak with a sports dietitian. And I know we didn't really go into hydration, but that's also really important, especially if you're running a marathon in hot weather and you're sweating a lot. for that extended period of time, you want to make sure that you're replenishing electrolytes, salt, as well. So again, work with a sports dietitian for your nutrition plan or your race plan, but you want to make sure you're also consuming something salty, whether it's a sports drink. Oftentimes you'll see, little pretzel snacks that have salt on them. So just another thing to think about in terms of fueling during more longer periods of time.
Absolutely. So we just had two people write in. Someone says honey stringer gummies are my favorite, and someone else recommends maple syrup. So those
are really good.
That's good to know. So if you back them, then everyone can try them. That's great. Well, Dr. Nicole, it was amazing to have you on tonight. You shared so much with us, from the science to the practical to, the simple things that we can all do day to day. And for those of us who are athletes and especially doing high intensity workouts, it's so important to consider this topic. I think it's something that is not talked about enough. So I really appreciate you being on tonight, and we'd love to have you back for another class at some point. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much.